The Stone Zone, with legendary Republican strategist and political icon and pundit Roger Stone. Stone has served as a senior campaign aide to 3 Republican presidents. He is a New York Times best-selling author and a longtime friend and advisor of President Donald Trump. As an outspoken libertarian, Stone has appeared on thousands of broadcasts, spoken at countless venues, and lectured before the prestigious Oxford Political Union and the Cambridge Union Society. Due to his 4+ decades in the political and cultural arena, Stone has become a pop culture icon. And now, here's your host, Roger Stone.
Welcome to the Stone Zone with Roger Stone. I am not Roger Stone. I am Mark Vargas filling in for Roger today, and we have an incredible show for you. We've heard a lot about the Biden health cover-up, but that's not the only one. And our guest this evening, the interview is going to shock you and disappoint you. So let's get started. Let's welcome U.S. Army Major Mandy Feindt to the show. Mandy has an incredible story of what her and her family have experienced a hell over the last 3 years, along with so many other thousands and thousands of military families just off of Joint Base Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Mandy, thank you for joining us here on the Stone Zone.
Thank you so much, Mark, for having me. I appreciate it.
It's my honor. Mandy, let's just set a little bit of background. How long have you been in the military, and why did you want to serve your country?
I've been affiliated with the military for over 20 years. 9/11 happened my senior year of high school, and I come from an Army family. So naturally, when I went to college, I did ROTC and received my commission that way. And I served because, I felt like it was my duty. We are a very patriotic family, and I care a lot about our country. And I felt like it was my time to give back and to serve.
So fast forward, you and your family, your husband and your children, you get assigned to go to Hawaii, an island, a paradise where everybody loves the vacation. My family vacations. We have a timeshare in Waikiki Beach. It's my special place. So you go to Hawaii and you experience something that you never would have imagined. Your worst nightmares come true. Lay the groundwork for us. What happened once you arrived in Hawaii?
Sure. Yes, like you said, Hawaii was our dream location. It was where I thought I was going to retire. We brought a 3-month-old baby and a 2.5-year-old to Hawaii. We were otherwise a pretty healthy family, and just were living the dream in paradise, right? Until we were poisoned in paradise. I was working with Special Operations Command Pacific at the time. We lived in a historic home that had survived the attack on Pearl Harbor. And we just felt so blessed to be part of that living piece of history, if you will. But almost immediately, and I want to be clear, when we first moved to the island, we did live off base. It was in the middle of COVID and we couldn't get on base housing. So while we were living off base, again, our family was pretty healthy. But at the end of April, early May of 2021, we did get offered that house on historic Fort Island. And of course, we took it. But almost immediately after we moved into that house, our family began to get super sick. My son at the time, I to this day, don't know him without a cough, but he developed a cough that sort of never went away. He would get rashes from waist down, and I couldn't understand why. I never in a million years did I think it would be the water, but looking back on it now, I don't know how I didn't, but the rashes were from waist down. So at that age, your son's not showering. He's sitting in a bathtub, waist down, and they weren't rashes. None of the topical creams that the doctors were giving us were working, and that was because it was chemical burns. And as a mother, what I tried to do when none of the topical creams and things would work, I bought some Aveeno baby bath soak, and I just continued to soak my son in the water to try to soothe him. And looking back, now I know that I was making that worse, but that was sort of, the lung and derm issues that my son has had. But as a family, we've dealt with a number of issues, from neurological conditions, gastrointestinal issues, behavioral issues. As you can imagine, this has been a huge mental health crisis for us as a family. And I want to be clear, this didn't just impact the Feindt family. We are one of 93,000 people who were impacted by this water crisis. So in May, there was a spill. The Navy didn't tell us about it. We were sick all through the summer, along with thousands of others. And then uh, in November of 2021, there was another massive spill. 20,000 gallons of fuel were leaked, and there was no denying at that point. Thousands of people cooked their Thanksgiving meal with contaminated jet fuel, contaminated water. We evacuated our home for 3 months, living out of 7 different hotel rooms. Our lives have never been the same since. So yeah, that's kind of like background, and I'm sure we'll go into like what's gone on since then. But it's been devastating.
Mandy, I can't imagine. So there was a jet fuel leak in the tanks that seeped into the water system. And so the water that you're using to cook, to bathe, to wash your clothes was all contaminated. I've read these stories that said that the military communities smelled like a gas station. What was the initial response from U.S. military officials when you began sounding the alarms that, wait a second, our family is becoming violently ill and everything smells like a gas station? What was the initial response?
The initial response from the base commander was there's no indication of harm. My staff and I are drinking the water still today. What we didn't know is that the Hawaii Department of Health did know about this leak because the Navy had notified them. However, that was not relayed to their 93,000 residents. And we didn't at that time even know that the Department of Health had issued a no drink, a water advisory not to drink your water. The Navy was telling its residents that there's no indication that the water is not safe. My staff and I are drinking it. And quite honestly, Mark, we believed them. I'd been in the military, had a really wonderful career. I've been a commander myself in the military. I know that senior leaders are put in those positions, and they are charged with making the best decisions that impact people's lives. And I trusted the leadership at the time who was telling us our water was safe and there was no indication that it wasn't. So we continued to drink the water. We didn't find out until several weeks later, um, until there was a hand delivered note taped to our door that our water was in fact not safe.
93,000 people affected. Mandy, of those 93, how many were military families, active duty military families?
I don't have an exact number, but that is predominantly military families. There are a few now in 2021 considered off-base housing, but those homes were once, military occupied spaces that had ran water pipes. And so though there are certain communities that are now civilians, um, those residents were impacted because they lived in previous or prior Army or Navy housing. But yeah, I would say, probably about 90% of those families were military families and their innocent children and, their spouses.
We all know that President Obama is from Hawaii. He vacations there every year. He spends a lot of time. He's the former commander in chief. We know that President Joe Biden, your current commander in chief, has taken trips to Hawaii, to the island. We know that Vice President Harris has also vacationed in Hawaii. What has been the response from those three? And have you been able to get access to them to discuss this horrific case of water contamination by jet fuel that has caused 93,000 families, predominantly military families, to become violently ill? What has been the response from the commander in chief and the former commander in chief, Barack Obama?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying that there has been no public acknowledgement um, from our commander in chief in that administration of the Red Hill water crisis. I have previously met President Obama. He was the commander in chief when the Fort Hood shooting happened, and I happened to be there. He also came to Afghanistan when I was deployed. And I've heard him speak many times, and I thought for sure he was going to be the first that came in and sort of supported the military community, at least, and the Hawaii community at large, to be clear. But that didn't happen. I've reached out to President Biden numerous times. I did get a letter back about a year ago, but it was a form letter, and it, it did address my name and it thanked me for my service. But the letter just talked about everything that the Biden administration had done to support troops, to include bird pits, but it didn't even mention the words Red Hill. Just like you, Mark, Kamala Harris, our vice president, enjoys vacationing to Hawaii. In fact, she came to Hawaii in the middle of the crisis, and there were protesters standing outside the resort that she vacationed. Her and her husband were at. Please talk to Red Hill family, shut down Red Hill. Um, and while she was there, Red Hill, she never mentioned or came to visit a single Red Hill impacted family. President Biden did stop, as you mentioned, on Joint Base Pearl Harbor-Hickam to refuel after he'd been overseas. And I thought this is going to be the moment. He's here on the tarmac. We've got service members out. Everyone's excited to see him. And he took, selfies on the tarmac with our Governor Ige at the time, and didn't ever address Red Hill, unfortunately. So that is disappointing. And as our commander in chief, our most senior, leader, certainly I have been really disappointed. And I know that there's been a lot of effort, not only from impacted families and military families, but, the Hawaii community at large, who this will continue to impact for generations. I mean, I just sat in a meeting yesterday. There is still, contamination. There are still petroleum products. There is PFAS and, lead in the water, all resulting from Red Hill leaks. And there has just been a complete lack of support from, not only the administration, which is disappointing, but our senior military leadership. And yeah, it's been really disheartening as a service member.
This has been 3 years now, and again, no response, no um, compassionate response from senior government officials like the president, vice president, secretary of defense. Mandy, just explain just sort of the cost that this has had on your family, but not just your family, but the thousands and thousands of active duty military families. For example, how many doctor's appointments have you, your husband, Patrick, and your children, how many doctor's appointments have you had as a family over the last 3 years because of this contamination that the U.S. military has tried to cover up initially?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Obviously, I've got littles. My kids are now 4 and 6. But we as a family of four have been to over 600 medical appointments in the past 3 years. I've had to put my kiddos under 9 times for different various medical procedures. My husband's had 3 gastrointestinal surgeries. I am still serving on active duty, but we've had to do 2 compassionate reassignments where I've ended up in a soldier recovery unit as a patient or as a soldier in recovery. I'm not doing my actual job right now. My job is to, recover, to heal, to seek and get the medical care that I finally, have needed and deserve as a service member who's been impacted by a known toxic exposure. And like I said, the cost like on our family and our mental health, I think exceeds everything else. And again, not just our family. We are one of thousands who have had to move their families. There have been families that have been separated. I mean, we lived 6 months apart as a family because of this crisis, because our number one priority has been to get to a place where we can get adequate medical care for our children. And the same goes for, other military families. They've been separated, they've had to move, burn through their life savings, whether that's to supply their own alternate water source or to live in a hotel, or, to just escape, which sounds crazy, to escape Hawaii, so that they can live in a home that supplies clean and adequate drinking water, and they can get to a place that does not deny them medical care and say this stuff is in and out of your body. We were denied when we were living in Hawaii. The big push for us to leave is because we were being denied medical care. And what happened is, this is a Navy, a military asset. So let's talk about this. This is an American military asset that poisoned American civilians on American soil. And we have spent the past 3 years treating those families like collateral damage. We have allowed the Fox, right, who is the DoD or the Navy in this instant, to guard the hen house for far too long. And that hen house is, military families and the people of Hawaii have been allowed to, for 3 years, to take care of this issue. And that take care of, means doing the environmental remediation, providing the medical quote unquote care. And as you can imagine, that's been pretty frustrating because really what I feel like this whole thing is a Camp Lejeune 2.0. And we've been involved in a massive cover up for 3 years.
Mandy, I'd expect, I mean, you've been making so much noise over the last 3 years and trying to get the attention of President Biden, Vice President Harris, the Secretary of Defense, senior military officials. I can only imagine that there's been pushback and perhaps even threats or consequences for you personally, professionally, for coming out so hard and so strong. What sort of impact has this had on your career in the military when, in fact, you're David versus Goliath? You're an Army major going up against the most senior officials in the U.S. military and in the U.S. government and asking for accountability. What kind of impact has that had on your professional military career?
The story of David and Goliath has certainly resonated with me in this situation, and it's really sad that um, when it's your own government that you feel like is the Goliath in this, when it's your own institution. And the only thing I can say is that I didn't know what institutional betrayal was until this happened. I am still a huge patriot of this country. Most people are saying, why the heck are you still in the military? These people have poisoned your kids. And it's because genuinely I care. I care about our country. I care about, the less than 1% of our population that serves our military. Quite frankly, I think the military still needs leaders of moral courage and integrity, and those who have the intestinal fortitude to speak up when they see something that is wrong. And what happened here at Red Hill and what continues to happen is wrong. Um, Obviously, I have faced gross retaliation. I had to file for Department of Defense whistleblower protection in February of 2022. And I'm sure that most people who have gone through something like this would not be surprised to hear that that case has still not been adjudicated. And so, because of that, I've had to watch the leaders that have retaliated against me and made my life a living hell, get promoted or move on with their careers or retire with their careers intact while I've been sort of kept in this purgatory. And it's been it's been rough, it's been tough. Like I said, it's been a huge hit to my mental health. There obviously is a huge impact and risk to my career here, but what I've said all along is that this is not about me. This is again not about the Fight family. The risk that far outweighs my career here is the risk to people's lives, and that's why it's so important to continue to speak on this. And it's why I'm so appreciative of people like you allowing us a platform to continue to amplify the Red Hill story.
My final question to you, Mandy, is what can we do? What's your ask of this administration, these military officials? What can we all do, and what is it that you need to bring a resolution to this hell that you and so many thousands have been experiencing for the last 3 years?
Sure. I think awareness is extremely important. I think, the greater issue when we start talking about recruiting, for example, and why we're, in this recruiting crisis across the board, I think you have to look internally at what's gone on over the past couple of years, starting with, the Afghanistan withdrawal or, how we did the mandatory COVID vaccine and those mandates and how the service members were treated if they had a conviction, their religious conviction said otherwise, and they asked for that accommodation, and they were treated poorly because of that. I think we have to look at how we handle things like sexual assault and other toxic exposures like burn pits, Red Hill. I think we have to take a look at how it is when we want to look at like why we have a recruiting issue. I think we should start looking at how it is as we as leaders, how we're treating people who do have the intestinal fortitude to come forward, who are convicted morally. And we are taught, to lead with a moral compass, again, to make the right decisions, to make the hard right decisions. I hate when people say that because a right decision should be easy. It should never be hard. But going through this, I understand now why it is that we say that. But going back to your original question, I think what I want most out of this is just for folks to have awareness. And the second thing is Red Hill and the people on Oahu and that community on that Navy drinking water system, the people of White, they still need help today. The water is still contaminated today. Those people need an alternate water source. We need independent third party oversight of the issue at Red Hill. We need a congressional hearing, to be completely honest, so that our senior leaders can hear from impacted families and hear from the people on that island, how it is that we were treated, and the impacts that are still happening to families as we speak today.
U.S. Army Major Mandy Feindt, thanks for joining us here on the Stone Zone for your story. We'll be sure to follow up and check up on progress. But God bless you, God bless your family, and God bless the military families there in Hawaii. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mark.
What an incredible story. Again, we're accustomed to the greatest health cover-up in modern presidential history, and that is the cover-up of Joe Biden's health issues. And it's why the key Democratic Party officials hijacked the Democratic primary process and pushed Joe Biden out, and the 14 million Democratic primary voters who voted for him as their nominee for president in the 2024 election and replaced him with Vice President Kamala Harris, who no one voted for. That was the original health cover-up. But now we're seeing that there is not just one, there are multiple health cover-ups. And what's happening right now in Hawaii, just right off of Joint Base Pearl Harbor, 93,000 military families affected by this contamination. Jet fuel leaking into their water supply, the water that they cook with, bathe with, wash their clothes with. These families have been poisoned. Army Major Mandy Feindt and her family, her husband and her 2 children, have had over 600, let me repeat that, 600 doctor's appointments in the last 3 years because of this poisoning and contamination. Her husband has had multiple surgeries. Her children are still suffering. Military families still suffering. Active duty military service members still suffering. And what's the response of President Joe Biden, the commander in chief? Nothing. What's the response from Kamala Harris, the Democratic candidate for president of the United States? Nothing. What's the response from Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin? Nothing. In fact, for a while, senior military officials denied that this water was contaminated, despite the fact that you could simply walk around the neighborhood, walk into their homes, go to the bathroom, take a shower. You could smell the jet fuel. It smelled like a gas station, and yet U.S. service member officials, senior military officials said the water is clean. We're drinking the water. When in fact, that was a total lie. That was a total cover-up. And how did these military families get notice that in fact their water was contaminated by jet fuel that had leaked, and that they were correct and that the military was wrong? How did these families get a notification? By a note taped to the front door of their home. What a total disgrace. What a total disgrace that the commander-in-chief, Joe Biden, and the vice president, Kamala Harris, and the former president, Barack Obama, who is a resident of Hawaii. What a disgrace that these 3 individuals, to this day, 3 years later, have done nothing about it. Well, that's about to change, and we're so grateful for service members like Mandy Feindt, who has faced retaliation since day one, but that hasn't stopped her in making as much noise as she possibly can to stand up for these 93,000 military families in Hawaii who continue to suffer this day. I ask for you to keep these families in your thoughts and your prayers. They serve us. Now it's time for us to serve them and get some closure on this and make sure that these individuals, senior individuals within the U.S. military, and that President Joe Biden and Vice President Harris and former President Obama are held accountable, because they go to Hawaii all the time. Obama vacations in Hawaii. He has a home in Hawaii. They're not even meeting with these family members, 93,000 of them. They're not even meeting with a single one to say, I hear your cries and we're here to help. What a disgrace. And I'm grateful for platforms like the Stone Zone, where we can get these stories out and generate as much attention as we possibly can. Now I'd like to switch gears and talk about last night, the Al Smith dinner, a dinner that is a charity, a dinner that is very important within the Catholic community. And where's Vice President Kamala Harris? She skips the event. We've got a couple of clips from last night that I thought were worthy. President Donald Trump had a great evening, gave a tremendous speech. He was clearly well received in New York City. And so let's play a couple of those clips. The first clip will be of President Trump talking about Harris disrespecting the Al Smith dinner. Let's take a look.
It's been a long tradition for both Democrat and Republican candidates for president of the United States to attend this dinner. It's a rule. You got to go to the dinner. You got to do it. Otherwise, bad things are going to happen to you from up there. You can't do what I just saw on that screen. But my opponent feels like she does not have to be here, which is deeply disrespectful to the event and in particular to our great Catholic community. Very disrespectful. The last Democrat not to attend this important event was Walter Mondale, and it did not go very well for him. He lost 49 states and he won one, Minnesota. So I said, there's no way I'm missing it. Actually, it was not easy for me to get here tonight. Because I wasn't going to miss this thing, no matter, I didn't care. I wasn't going to miss it. But that's true. Walter Mondale, 49-1. He was expected to do well, and it didn't work out. It shows you there is a God. I mean, for those people that are questioning it. I understand the real reason that she's not here is she's hunting with her running mate, spending a lot of time hunting. In any event, it's a weird. You know the word weird. They call me weird. They call JD weird. We're very solid people.
Historic.
This guy is calling us weird, but this was weird that the Democrat candidate is not here and with us tonight.
That was a historic moment in Al Smith dinner history when President Donald Trump called out the sitting Vice President of the United States and the Democratic nominee for President of the United States for not attending this important dinner. And when he called her out and openly said that it was disrespectful to the attendees and to the Catholic community, you heard a gigantic round of applause. What a historic evening. Another moment, another part of that evening that has been generating widespread attention and has gone viral on social media is sitting right to President Trump's left is Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, a New Yorker, a man who President Donald Trump has known for decades. And what has caught everybody's attention is that throughout the entire evening that President Trump was giving his speech, Senator Schumer had this scowl look on his face. He rarely laughed, rarely looked up. He just looked angry and uncomfortable, like he didn't want to be there. And knowing that the whole world was watching that speech and that he was sitting right next to President Trump, Senator Schumer couldn't hide his disgust and anger and frustration. It was written all over his face. And I can't help but think that this was indicative of how the Democratic Party is feeling in these final weeks of the campaign as President Trump's poll numbers continue to rise. He strengthens his lead in the key swing states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And Vice President Kamala Harris and her running mate Tim Walz continue on their downward trajectory. And so let's play a clip of President Trump, and you can see the glum look on Senator Schumer's face. Let's take a look at that.
Coming in very, very strong, a certain way. I won't tell you what way that is, but Chuck Schumer is here looking very glum. Doesn't he look glum? He looks glum. But look on the bright side, Chuck, considering how woke your party has become. If Kamala loses, you still have a chance to become the first woman president.
What a zinger. And you can see again the response from the crowd. Schumer clearly uncomfortable to be there because the room was not on their side. The room was clearly on the side of President Trump, and the fact that Vice President Harris skipped this event is going to have catastrophic consequences for her and the Democratic Party in this final stretch of the campaign. Another moment that has captured the attention of the world and has gone viral, and I'm sure many of you have seen this, but let's break this down. This is a conversation at Ethel Kennedy's funeral just a couple of days ago in Washington, D.C. It was another historic moment because it was the first time that President Joe Biden has come face to face with the two individuals that literally kicked him out of the presidential campaign. That's Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi. And cameras caught a moment that I think both Biden and Obama wished hadn't been caught on camera, but the two of them are having a very heated and animated conversation, and everybody is out trying to figure out what they were discussing. Lip readers have suggested their thoughts. I've gotten my thoughts. I know that you have yours as well. But let's take a look at this clip that has gone viral of President Obama and President Biden speaking for the very first time in person, face to face, since Obama kicked him out of the presidential campaign in July. Let's take a look. Clearly an animated discussion. You could see the look on Joe Biden's face. He was not happy. And at one point, Obama tried to turn the other way, and Biden grabbed his arm to refocus his attention back to him. At the end of this clip, you see an arm reach out and redirect their attention to the front of the church. That was President Bill Clinton seemingly intervening in a very heated discussion and trying to redirect their attention back to the front of the church. But lip readers have been analyzing the discussion, and it seems to be unanimous that they were discussing, in fact, Kamala Harris. Joe Biden was expressing his frustration, it appears, with her campaign. President Obama seemed to agree at one point, but there is clearly frustration going amongst the two of them in a clip that literally has gone viral around the world. And there's no doubt in my mind that Joe Biden is angry and he feels betrayal. And Speaker Newt Gingrich hit the nail on the head, I believe, about a week or two ago when he said that he believes that in the last month, Jill Biden and Joe Biden got together and said that their legacy depends on Kamala Harris losing, that Joe Biden doesn't want Kamala Harris to win the election against President Donald Trump, and that he is very publicly contradicting her in speeches and in statements. There's Nancy Pelosi has admitted publicly that she has not had a conversation with President Biden, who she has been very close with for decades. They used to speak on a daily basis when she was Speaker of the House, and they've continued a very warm relationship. But since this summer, when she helped orchestrate his removal, literally stealing an election in broad daylight, denying 14 million Democratic primary voters their choice for president of the Democratic nominee for president of the United States. And so she admits that she hasn't had a single conversation with Joe Biden since that time this summer. And you could sense the tension. And there's no doubt about it. Just during the hurricane response, you have Vice President Harris talking about slamming and Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida for not returning her calls and slamming his hurricane response. You have that statement by Harris one day. The following day, Joe Biden is speaking in front of the press. And what's he doing? He's praising Ron DeSantis for his response to the hurricane and saying that he's got his direct number and that he speaks to him often and that the two of them are in touch. That's not accidental of Joe Biden contradicting Kamala Harris. That is on purpose. On September 11th at a firehouse in New York City, just blocks from ground zero, it wasn't accidental that Joe Biden, who's been in politics for 100 years, he knows what he's doing. He may be senile, but he's not stupid. And the fact that he jokingly put on a Trump 2024 hat in a firehouse in New York City on September 11th, that too is not accidental. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he's projecting a message. He's been betrayed. He feels the ultimate betrayal from his own party, who pushed him out for a candidate who has proven to be so ill-prepared for the presidency, a candidate who hides from the press, a candidate who won't answer simple questions about basic policies, who can't defend her record, who has a vice presidential candidate who is a serial liar, who has literally destroyed the city of Minneapolis during the pandemic with rioting and looting and allowed those small businesses to be destroyed. Lives and livelihoods were destroyed. Serial liar who in the debate when he was beaten very badly by Vice Presidential candidate J.D. Vance, he was proven again in front of national television that he lies. And how does he defend it? Well, I'm just a knucklehead sometimes. This is the most progressive, liberal, anti-American, and I'll add one more, ill-prepared ticket in the history of our country. And it is why poll numbers are strengthening around President Trump's candidacy in this final stretch of the campaign. We've got a graphic from Real Clear Politics to give you an idea of red, soft red, and blue of what the country currently looks like. According to Real Clear Politics, the Electoral College certainly has Trump at 312 and Harris at 226. And you need 270 to win the presidency. You could see an overwhelming majority of the country is red, and that they support President Trump. And the three states that we want to pay particular close attention to are the states that are a soft red, a light red, and that's Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And those three states is how we're going to win this presidency. But you ask yourself the question, why are these numbers looking like this, 312 to 226? And it is very simple. It's a breakdown of three key issues. Number one, the economy and inflation. Groceries have skyrocketed. The cost of fuel has skyrocketed. I've heard these stories, and you've seen these stories all over the country of elderly residents and citizens who have retired, who are in their 70s and early 80s, having to go back to work again and work at places like grocery stores, bagging groceries. Why? Because they can't afford the cost of living under the Biden-Harris policies. They can't afford groceries at the same time that they need to put gas in their cars. At the same time, they need to pay for required and necessary medication. This is not a sustainable model. Everyday hardworking Americans are hurting. You see this all across the country. So number one, the economy and inflation. Number two, this open border crisis that has allowed tens of millions of illegals to enter our country. And the US government, the FBI, has openly admitted, Customs and Border Patrol openly admitted that some of the world's most violent and dangerous criminals have already entered our country through our southern border. In fact, they've just walked into our country. It's why, and President Trump talks about this all the time, it's why in Venezuela, Maduro was talking about how crime has now decreased in Venezuela. I wonder why, because they've all been sent into the U.S. through our open border. Kamala Harris, as Attorney General back in California back in 2010, campaigned to be Attorney General on the fact that she would close the southern border and prevent dangerous illegals from entering our country, particularly these transatlantic gangs. And she bragged about when she was elected Attorney General on this issue, that she was prosecuting them and putting them in jail and sending them back to their home countries. Fast forward these years later, back 2020, 10 years later, and Kamala Harris, the border czar, is supporting policies to allow these very same individuals that she prosecuted, these very same violent gang members, transnational gang members from countries like Venezuela and other places in Central and South America. She's now allowing these same individuals that she said she was prosecuting and putting in jail and sending back to their home countries. Her policies have now allowed these very same individuals to re-enter our country through our southern border, through their wide open border policies. And so as a result, communities are not safe. Residents, families, tourists, their lives are in danger. In sanctuary city places like Chicago and New York City, you could see Venezuelan gangs and migrants beating up New York City police officers, robbing New York City residents and tourists. In Chicago, places like Chicago that have been run by Democrats for what feels like hundreds of years, but Democrats have a strong grip and control in Chicago and in Illinois. And what's happening with Chicago as sanctuary city? Police department has seen 11,000% increase in arrests in Venezuela of Venezuelans in the last 2 years. $500 million has gone towards the migrants to feed and clothe and put them in nice hotel rooms so that they have shelter. At the exact same time, these same Democratic officials in Chicago are telling their residents, their own citizens, that we don't have enough money to help rebuild your communities. Grocery stores are closing because of high crime. Food deserts. They can't go grocery shopping. They can't get fresh fruit or fresh produce. Their schools, Chicago public schools in these communities, are falling apart. Holes in the roofs, leaks, mold issues. Student test scores are crashing and dropping like a rock. But yet these same Democratic officials are complaining that they don't have enough money to take care of their residents, while at the same time they're pouring in nearly $500 million in the last 2 years to take care of these migrants. In Chicago alone, on the first day of school at the end of August, 1,900 students with disabilities could not get a ride to school on a school bus. Why? Because the city doesn't have enough money. They don't have enough bus drivers. And so just 3 days before the start of school, these families received an email from Chicago Public Schools officials saying that, I'm sorry, we cannot take your child with disabilities. They cannot go to school because we have a funding problem and we have a bus driver shortage. But again, let's pour all this money into these migrants who have entered our country illegally. It is why the Latino vote has now shifted towards President Trump. Latino voters who traditionally are Democratic voters, they are now in large numbers shifting to President Trump's corner. And I mark my words, I believe that President Trump is going to receive more of the Latino vote and the Black vote than any Republican in modern history. And it's because of this migrant crisis. It's because of this open border crisis. Think about these numbers for Latino business owners. There are over 5 million very successful Latino-owned businesses in the United States today that make up for over $800 million a year in revenue each year. In addition to that, of all of the successful startups in our country, 82% of those startups are Latino-owned startups. So there's no question, there's no doubt. The numbers prove it. The facts are there that Latino businesses and Black businesses, Black-owned businesses, are the engines that are driving our economy. And when you have these economic policies that are destroying businesses, destroying small businesses, with the cost of living skyrocketing, with business taxes skyrocketing, policies that aren't helping businesses to thrive and to grow and to hire more people. Instead, there's these policies are driving these businesses out of business. And it's why you see these numbers within the Latino community that are predominantly now in President Trump's corner. It's the economy. There's no question about that. It's the southern border. Think about even my own family members. I'm an American of Mexican descent. My own family members are voting for President Trump for the first time. Why? Because they had to go through the legal process of becoming a citizen. And it could take up to 10 years. It's an expensive, lengthy process that requires great patience. But my family members and family members of yours and from all across the country, they wanted to go the right way. They wanted to do it the legal way. And so they went through the process, as painful and as slow and as expensive as it is. So they're not happy when Kamala Harris and Joe Biden just open up the doors to our southern border and allow these migrants to just freely walk into our country. No questions asked, and we don't know who they are, their backgrounds, or where they've come from. I've said this many times before. There's a reason why you see signs posted outside of jails and prisons that says, "Do not pick up hitchhikers," because we don't know who they are. We don't know where they come from. We don't know their backgrounds. And so this same concept applies to those that are crossing our southern border illegally. So it's the economy and inflation. It's the border crisis and the crime that's continued to skyrocket in our cities. And third, it's foreign policy. We're on the verge of World War III between Israel and Iran. We had a horrific pullout in Afghanistan that resulted in 13 brave, heroic service members losing their lives. And what did Joe Biden and Kamala Harris do? They did this ill-prepared withdrawal that abandoned thousands and thousands of allies in Afghanistan. Our service members, we left billions of dollars of military equipment in Afghanistan for the Taliban. You know, they centered around Kabul airport, which is crowded, smaller, right smack dab in the middle of the city, dangerous, when in fact they could have planned and just gone down the road to Bagram Air Base that literally has hundreds and hundreds of acres and it's secure. But no, let's not evacuate through Bagram Air Base and bring all of our military equipment onto that base where it could be protected. No, that makes too much sense. Let's make our exit through Kabul airport, and let's hand over billions and billions of dollars of U.S. military equipment, body armor, vehicles, weapons, night vision goggles. You know, think about this. Prior to the Biden-Harris withdrawal in Afghanistan, the Taliban couldn't fight in the dark. They didn't have the technology to fight in the dark. But because we left our high-tech night vision goggles in Afghanistan, the Taliban can now fight in the dark. Uh, there are stories upon stories of um, these weapons, U.S. military weapons, being used against us, being used against our allies. And so when people see that we're on the verge of World War III and we have a president that doesn't even know where he's at, a president who falls asleep in meetings, a policy, a Biden-Harris foreign policy that victimizes our enemies and adversaries and criminalizes our friends and neighbors. American people see this. They see what's happened as a result. They also can see that Vice President Harris and Tim Walz are ill prepared to face leaders, brutal dictators like Xi Jinping in China and Vladimir Putin in Russia and Maduro in Venezuela and Kim Jong-un in North Korea. They are completely ill prepared. And no one can doubt, no one can deny that we didn't have any wars when Donald Trump was president for 4 years. We didn't have any wars. You cannot deny that fact. You also cannot deny the fact that people had more money in their pockets. Whether you supported President Trump or you didn't support President Trump, whether you're a Republican or you were a Democrat, across the board, unanimous, Americans had more money in their pockets. Americans' 401ks looked good under the Trump presidency. Wall Street felt confident. Our enemies feared us. That is no longer the case under the Biden-Harris administration. Think about the economic policies of Biden-Harris. You have companies, just recently it was announced that John Deere, a staple American company that serves our farmers in the agricultural community and the heartbeat of America in the Midwest. What's happened to John Deere, a company that's based in Illinois? They're laying off nearly 2,100 employees, and they're shifting their production to Mexico. This is what happens under Biden-Harris policies that have completely destroyed our economy, destroyed our reputation. And it is why, mark my words, President Donald Trump needs your support, needs you to go out and to vote, needs you to go and register friends to vote, because this election isn't about policies, so to speak, as traditional elections are about policies and the direction of our country. Now, granted, the three key issues, the border crisis, the economy, inflation, foreign policy, those are critical issues. But what we've seen over the last 3 years under the Biden administration is the use of lawfare and weaponizing government agencies like the FBI and the DOJ to target political enemies like President Trump and the Trump family and Trump associates like Roger Stone, like General Flynn, like George Papadopoulos, and like Steve Bannon, and like Peter Navarro. And they're going after anybody associated with President Trump. We're seeing a double standard, a two-tier justice system. We've seen multiple assassination attempts on the 45th president of the United States. His life is in danger because of the constant rhetoric coming out from the Democratic Party about how President Trump and the MAGA movement are a threat to democracy, how he is a threat to our ideals and our Constitution, that the MAGA movement is the enemy of the state. And as a result, not only President Trump's life, but the lives of his supporters, the lives of the MAGA movement are in grave danger because of the rhetoric coming out of the Democratic Party. So my point to all of this is more than just the three key issues that define this race. This isn't about issues anymore. This is a race, this is an election about good versus evil. We're experiencing spiritual warfare all around us. And it is why it is so important for you to go out and vote, for you to go out and support President Trump and the MAGA movement, for you to register your friends and your neighbors
and your colleagues to vote. It's why we need to focus so much attention on the 3 key swing states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, so that we can win this election and turn our country around. Because Elon Musk is right. If we don't win this election, this may be our last. We may never have an election again. I'm so grateful for Roger Stone, who couldn't be with us today. He will be back. But I want to thank you for listening, for tuning into this. I want you to keep U.S. Army Major Mandy Feindt and her family and the 93,000 active duty service members and their families in your thoughts and your prayers in Hawaii, just off of Joint Base Pearl Harbor, who have literally been poisoned by their by the U.S. military officials, and who denied it initially, who tried to cover it up, but finally were forced to admit it. And to this day, 3 years later, and for the Feindt family, 600 doctor's appointments later, we're still no closer to a resolution. Nobody within Joe Biden's administration, his government, senior military officials, nobody's taken responsibility or been held accountable for these actions. And as a result, military members' lives are in grave danger. And U.S. Army Major Mandy Feindt, who continues to stand up against this administration and stand up against senior military officials, she's faced retaliation as a result. And so we want to keep these 93,000 military families in our thoughts and our prayers. And I encourage you to spread this far and wide to ensure that it gets the attention necessary in order to save these lives and livelihoods from further chaos and destruction. I'm Mark Vargas, filling in this evening for Roger Stone. Thank you for watching the Stone Zone. God bless you, and God bless America.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone. Where's Roger Stone?